We've an hour-long episode of Emmerdale for you at 7, but now it's time for all your stories across Scotland in the STV News.
This is the STV News. Good evening. Reducing COVID self-isolation rules from 10 to 7 days would be a false economy, according to a Scottish health expert. Gillian Evans from NHS Grampian says it's too soon to follow in England and Northern Ireland's footsteps, with the Omicron variant spreading so rapidly. More than 16,800 cases of COVID were recorded in the last 24 hours, another record high. Here's our political reporter, Laura Alderman.
Another busy, festive lunch service for this restaurant in Bothwell. But with so many staff off self-isolating right now, they're struggling to keep their doors open, with remaining staff working 14-hour shifts.
To be down that many is quite difficult. It's longer wait times, which we do. Like customers that come in, we do see them and we say, listen, you know what's going on. It's been really, really tough. We are short. We want to give you the best experience possible. Please just understand there will be a longer wait time for certain things.
Some businesses were hoping Scotland would follow England and Northern Ireland by cutting the self-isolation period from 10 days to 7. But the Scottish Government has delayed that decision until next week.
We just need to very carefully balance the risk of increased transmission, which inevitably there will be if the isolation period is shortened, with the benefit that we would get from people being able to go to work and people being able to resume normal life sooner. We know it's hard to ask people to self-isolate.
It's led to disruption on the railways too, with hundreds of trains being cancelled every day. Yesterday, more than 320 ScotRail staff were off for COVID-related reasons.
So from January, we are reducing the number of trains in our timetable to reflect the fact that we're seeing much higher levels of absence from our staff. And we're also seeing less demand from customers.
Health and social care workers can be exempt from the 10-day isolation if they're fully vaccinated and return a negative PCR result. But industry leaders say taking a cautious approach now is the right one.
We simply don't have the data, particularly as to how that reduction would impact on an extremely potentially vulnerable community, such as older people living in a care home or those being supported in the community by home care.
More than 16,800 cases of COVID were recorded in the last 24 hours, another record high. And test positivity is up at 27%. An unprecedented demand for testing, combined with a global shortage of kits, has impacted the turnaround time for results too.
I think we're just trying to pull out all the stops to get things moving again as quickly as we can. It's testing everyone's patience. I have to be honest, it is testing everyone's patience, but it's the right strategy. We must continue to see if we can invest more in it and speed the process up for people.
76% of all eligible adults have now had a booster dose. The target was 80% before the bells. But then again, there is still time before we ring in 2022. Laura Alderman, STV News.
Well, with the last push to get as many people boosted by the bells underway, one man from Dundee who lost both parents to COVID within hours of each other has told how his loss convinced him to get the vaccine. Graham Carling's mum and dad, who were in their 60s, died in January. He's been speaking to our reporter, Callum Clark.
We were so concerned about my mum. My dad was okay, up until sort of the end of the first week in January. He was no problem. We were worried about my mum.
Graham's fears for his mum's health were sadly realised on the 19th of January. At the same time, his dad was also being treated in hospital, but doctors believed he was coping.
Nine Wells Hospital phoned me back, and the doctor was in a pretty distressed state, because I just spoke to her 15 minutes before and she said it was okay, saying that look, when she got back to the ward, my dad had passed. Now, that was just, it's your worst nightmare come true.
Graham's still coming to terms with losing his parents so quickly. He says their passing made his mind up about getting vaccinated.
My mum's phone pinged the day after, on the 20th of January, inviting her down for the first vaccine. So my mum and dad didn't have an opportunity we were in two minds before that, I'll be honest. You know, we weren't sure, you know, we didn't know anybody that had been really affected by it. It was, but, you know, when something like that happens to you, it really hits home.
Graham knows better than most the devastation COVID-19 can have on a family. He hopes sharing his pain will encourage more of us to get the vaccine. Callum Clark, STV News.
The leaders of Scotland's Drug Deaths Task Force have quit. The organisation was set up by the Scottish Government 2.5 years ago to tackle the country's record drug deaths. Professor Katrina Matheson and Neil Richardson criticised the demand for speed from Drugs Minister Angela Constance as counterproductive and driven by meeting targets rather than achieving sustainable change.
There are lives at stake here. This is Scotland's other public health emergency, and I think it's perfectly reasonable to be asking for recommendations sooner as opposed to later, so that we can get on in 2022 to be making those changes where they matter most, and that's on the ground, that's in our services, and that's in the communities affected most by drug-related deaths in Scotland.
Well, it's a big blow to the SNP, and I think it will once again pile pressure on the Scottish Government to deal with the national shame of Scotland's drug death record, which has gone up every single year. Now, I believe the task force was working too slowly. It wasn't making enough progress, but there are serious questions now for the Scottish Government to answer.
A diabetic product used across Scotland is to be investigated by its US manufacturer over safety fears. Insulet, who make the Omnipod system, which automatically supplies insulin, is looking into how a man from Glasgow was allegedly given 4 days' worth of the hormone in just 48 minutes, leading to his death. Ollie Dickinson reports.
Paul McNerney had managed his type 1 diabetes since the age of 2, injecting himself with insulin up to 4 times a day. But the lawyer wanted an Omnipod, a wearable pump that delivers insulin automatically, taking away the need for the JAGs.
With repeated injections and finger pricking, it was painful, it's inconvenient. Paul, obviously being a lawyer, having to inject in court or correct his blood glucose whilst he was in court is difficult. If we're on a car journey, do you know? So the reason for going on to the pod device was really just to free Paul up.
Paul's device was fitted just 4 days before he and Scott were married in July, but just a few months later, something went horribly wrong when Scott found Paul unresponsive in their bedroom with his blood sugar levels dangerously low.
The ambulance crew said that they didn't really know what had happened, but it was quite possible that he'd had a stroke. So that was their first instinct. So I followed the ambulance to the hospital. 10 minutes later, a female doctor came into the room and sat with me, asked me what had happened the night before. She then said Paul was on a life support machine. And they didn't know what was wrong. They didn't know what had happened.
Data from Paul's device showed the 39-year-old received 4 days' worth of insulin in just 48 minutes. Paul suffered huge brain damage, slipped into a coma, and never woke.
Someone pulled a rug, and I fell. And it didn't stop. It didn't stop. And nobody could give me an answer. Nobody could tell me what happened.
As Paul's death is being treated as unexplained, police have seized the Omnipod, passing it to the UK health regulator for inspection. In a statement, the US-based maker of the device, Insulet, said, "Consumer safety is our number one priority," adding that they have been made aware of this unfortunate incident and are working with the Ministry of Health and Regulatory Affairs in the UK to obtain the device for further investigation. They go on to say they believe their product is safe and have seen no evidence of any malfunction and extend their deepest condolences to Mr McNerney's loved ones. Scott believes the Omnipod device was faulty, but until investigations are complete, he's left with the pain of losing his husband so unexpectedly.
He's the most humble, kind, generous, the most loving person. Beautiful man. An absolutely beautiful man. I miss him.
The Crown Office say an investigation into Paul's death is ongoing and the family will continue to be kept updated with any developments. Ollie Dickinson, STV News, Glasgow.
Rail passengers are being warned to expect further disruption tomorrow after the RMT union confirmed a 24-hour strike will go ahead. Cross-country services between Aberdeen and Edinburgh and Glasgow Central and Edinburgh will be cancelled, and trains between Edinburgh and Plymouth will be reduced. Staff are walking out in an ongoing dispute over the role of guards. Compensation amounting to tens of thousands of pounds has been paid out to teachers injured at work in the past year. 18 EIS members were awarded a total of £167,000, a drop on the previous year's figure of £700,000. And now Sean has the weather forecast.
Today's outlook is becoming more and more unsettled. TUI Blue Hotels sponsor STV Weather.
Well, all of that exceptional warmth we've got at the moment is actually coming in from North Africa and the Canaries. And look at the temperatures today. Tenerife, 28 degrees Celsius. That's the same as a very warm day for us in the summer and well above even what they would normally expect at this time of year. The Costa del Sol, 24, an absolute scorcher for this time of year. And that warmth, that warm plume of air moving our way. We're just on the edge of it. Temperatures today, 12 to 14 degrees Celsius. And we hang on to that mild air over the next couple of days, but next week, Tuesday onwards, we start to see that cold blast of air coming back in from the north, but for the time being, remaining very, very mild. Now, through tonight, we'll see rain moving back into central and southern parts. Some of it will be on the heavy side as well, but look at the overnight temperatures. 10 degrees, Dumfries and Galloway, Ayrshire, South Lanarkshire, that's 50 degrees in Fahrenheit. Chillier across northern parts, where we've got some clear spells. Also quite breezy around the north and the northwest, scattered showers across the northern Isles. Now, that rain tomorrow continuing to drift its way into central areas, perhaps coming into parts of Angus and Aberdeenshire, but turning very showery here, and top temperatures tomorrow 14, maybe even 15 degrees around the East Lothian area and the borders. Now, this is the bells for you. And temperatures, these are not our daytime temperatures, these are the temperatures at midnight. We're about 10, 11 degrees central and southern parts, and most of the rain should have fizzled out here, but across the Highlands and also into Orkney we'll start to see some heavy rain developing as we head towards midnight. This weather front coming in, clear spells across Shetland, looking like a cracking night to come for Hogmanay. Then on New Year's Day, blustery and showery.
TUI Blue Hotels sponsor STV Weather.
Finally, he is the only surviving player from the first British side to compete in the European Cup back in 1955. And now Jackie Plenderleith reveals what it was like to play in football's bygone era in his new autobiography. Anne Smith has been to meet him to hear some of his proudest moments.
I used to head the ball every day in life.
Even in your dad's garden amongst the cabbages?
Oh, he told me once, he says, watch the cabbages now, you know.
A suitcase full of memories. The treasure trove contains fascinating cuttings and photographs of Jackie Plenderleith's illustrious footballing career.
I played for the school, then you go for the youth team, and then you go for the first division, and then you go for playing in a cup final, and then you go for international, you know. So I got them all, you know, so I can't complain.
The 84-year-old hit the headlines playing for Hibs as a 17-year-old during the club's golden years. He's the only surviving player from the first British side to compete in the European Cup back in 1955.
By this time, I'm cool. I'm not being big-headed. I know I'm good. So I just went on. There's Dennis the Law, Dennis the Menace, I used to call him.
He went on to play for Manchester City alongside the likes of Dennis Law. But it's his Scottish jersey which is pride of place in his home.
The one cap I got as a full cap was most exciting, you know. My down thing to it was I never got another cap. I must have been a bad boy somewhere.
Jackie Plenderleith's extraordinary career is told in his new autobiography. First and Last, How I Made European History with Hibs is a trip down memory lane, a nostalgic look back into the life of a sporting star during football's bygone era.
The story's great, you know. I mean, I think it's fantastic, you know.
It's your story.
It's my story. So we'll see how much money I make.
Anne Smith, STV News.
Well, that's it. We're back at the same time tomorrow evening. Enjoy the rest of your night. Good night.